everyone, my name is Christy. Welcome to my corner. Thank you for joining me today on this Tutorial Tuesday where I show you how I made this traveler's notebook out of my Red Deer 1596 cross stitch pattern. This tutorial is a little bit longer than my normal videos, but I wanted to make sure that it had enough information in it so that you could recreate this. And the nice thing about this tutorial is that, and the way I made this, is that you can do it with any horizontally oriented piece. So you don't have to do it with this piece, although this piece is very convenient because it has like a spine built into it. But you could do any horizontally oriented pattern. You could do two patterns with like a border in between. There are lots of possibilities for what you can do. I was just trying to come up with a way to fully finish a small embroidery or cross stitch piece that was not like a small pillow or something on the wall, because my house isn't decorated in such a way that a bowl of pillows won't end up with keys and coins and a dog leash in it also. So I just don't decorate that way. And so I was trying to figure out how I could fully finish my pieces in a way that I'd actually use them. And I think a traveler's notebook is the perfect way to do that. There are a couple things that I would do differently, which I'll talk about at the end. And I think I talk about it a bit during the process as well. In the description box below, I have a link to a PDF that I made that has the materials, the tools, and the measurements for this piece. But one thing to remember that I say kind of all over the place is that your measurements will be different because your piece will be a different size than this. Unless you do this exact piece on 14 count Aida, your finished piece is going to be a different size, and so your measurements to fully finish it into a traveler's notebook are going to be different. But I think I gave you enough information to adjust your measurements that fit the piece that you're trying to fully finish. For now, I will spin you around and put you back here and show you how I made this. Okay, so let's talk first about how it's constructed, and then we'll talk about the materials. I apologize for the lawn noise. It is summer in Mississippi and people do their lawn essentially every day. This is my prototype, and it is essentially a solid piece of stitching with a board and padding underneath the stitching, and then a piece of felt over it to keep it like all together and to cover up sort of the yucky parts. And then there are there's room for two notebooks because this is the traveler's notebook. So this is essentially what we're making. So first of all, you need your stitching, and this style of finishing is good for any horizontally oriented piece. Later on, I may do a tutorial for a like non-horizontally organized piece where you can kind of finish it and then add it to another piece of fabric to make this notebook. But for now, I'm doing it with this, and I figured it was perfect because I want this here to be the spine. So first, you need to pick your piece that you're finishing. Second, you need two pieces of chipboard. I have my my diagram here. In this case, these two pieces are 12.7 centimeters by 15 centimeters, and that essentially you want it to be basically cover your half of your stitching that you want to be the front cover and the back cover, and in this case they're the same size. And then I also have a piece that is for the spine that is 2 centimeters by 15 centimeters. So that's the chipboard. And the way I wanted it was that I wanted this entire dark red line to be on the spine, and so the fold is slightly over that. I also made them slightly taller than the piece so that there's a 1 stitch border all the way around. So that's how I organized it. So that is the chipboard, which will be your kind of main base. And then I want there to be a slight padding because of the way I stitch. There's some bulk, and I don't want that bulk to be obvious on the finished product. And so I chose just a craft felt that is a similar color to my fabric. So that way when it's underneath, it won't show through and it'll just look like it's slightly padded. And that is on each side about 1 millimeter less than the chipboard, because I don't want it to wrap over at all, but I also don't want it to be too small. So I have 2 pieces that are 12.6 and 14 by 14.9, and then I have 1 piece that is 1.9 by 14.9. And this is what the piece will be attached to, okay? I have an inside piece and I chose red, and that's going to be essentially this yellow piece here, but I don't want to cut it until I know exactly how big the whole piece is going to be. And so I'll give you those measurements later. So, but we do have that at the ready. And then you need notebooks, and these notebooks should be smaller than half of your piece. And these are much smaller. These I just got like on clearance at Michael's, and they are pre-made notebooks. You can make your own notebooks. It's actually not that difficult to make notebooks, and maybe I'll talk about that at some point. Or you can get notebooks at like the Dollar Tree, or you can get a larger notebook and cut it down. Like there are lots of different options for notebooks, but these I thought were good enough. I mean, I bought these to make traveler's notebooks, so I'm going to make them. So that's the general materials for like the piece. But let's talk about what you need for the construction of the piece. You need adhesives. So this is stitchery tape, which is made for stitching to other objects. And I got this on clearance at Joann Fabrics, but you can get it at Fat Quarter Shop. You can get it on Amazon. It's just called stitchery tape. I'm also using Eileen's original tacky glue. This is just a craft glue that works really well, and I like it. And I'm using this because I figure everyone has this. You need straight pins, a small sewing needle, and some sewing thread. You need an awl, some elastic cording. This I think is 1 millimeter. And I have these giant needles. These giant needles aren't necessary, but they sure do make it easier. So I don't know if you can see that, but that's a pretty giant needle. And I have these because I have an entire bookbinding kit. So I really enjoy binding books, and I decided to buy a kit to allow me to do that. But you can do this without a bookbinding kit if you have an awl or a sharp point. Yeah, that works. You need scissors, and I have fabric scissors and craft scissors. You need an X-Acto knife. You need a pen, a ruler, and this is stuff that I've already used, so I won't be using this stuff again, but the ruler, the X-Acto knife, the scissors, they're used to cut the chipboard and cut the felt and cut your piece to the size that you want. And I gave myself about 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters of room around the outside, and you'll see what I do with that. And then finally, completely optional, are some beads and some ribbon for closing. So I think that that's all of the materials, and I'll have these all linked down below, both the necessary and the optional. I'll put the dimensions for this piece down below in case you purchase this pattern and want to stitch it, but keep in mind that if you're making this book with your own stitching, it'll be different dimensions. And so what you need to figure out is how, if your piece isn't quite as well made for like a book binding as this, you basically need to decide how wide you want your spine to be, and that can be based on how thick your books are. So this is a pretty good one. This is, what is this, 3/4 of an inch or about 2 centimeters, and that's good for 2 of these notebooks. But if you have one thicker notebook, you know, it might change. If you have very thin, like one thin notebook, it might change. If you want to have 4 notebooks in there, you would definitely want it wider. So that's your decision based on the amount of notebooks you want in there. But I'm going to make this for 2 notebooks. And then you just need to sort of measure your cover of how big your cover is, as long as it is slightly larger. at least slightly larger than your notebook. I hope that makes sense. Let's get to the process. The first thing that I want to do is I want to attach this felt batting to the chipboard. And this chipboard is roughly 1.5 millimeters thick or 1/16 of an inch. And I'm not sure what weight it is. It's just chipboard that it's just sort of standard chipboard. You can also use like a cereal box for this. I mean, you don't have to buy anything special for this part. You just need felt and slightly hard cardboard. So what I'm going to do is take my Eileen's tacky glue and glue these pieces down to their corresponding chipboard pieces. Okay, so I have all these together and they're not dry. At this point, this does not have to be dry. It just needs to be like stuck on there. That's all that I'm worried about, is it being stuck on there. And now we work with the actual piece. Okay, so now we start with our construction and we have our piece of fabric, and I've evened out the sides to make our corners miter easier, and I've also clipped the corners a bit just to put a little less bulk in the actual inside of the piece. I'll show you. So if you look here, I have mitered corners, but that's pretty thick. That feels very thick right there. I don't want it that thick. So I mitered it, so I clipped it a little bit. And this is where the pins come in, and this is where our boards come in. Now I want to start with the spine, because the spine I want to make sure is centered, and luckily I have this, you know, spine area, which is why I'm making this into a booklet. And so I just have to make sure that it's even. One of the things that I did when I measured this is that I made sure that there was a 1 square border all the way around. That's how I tried to measure it. Now whether it will come up that way, I don't know. I'm not very good at exact, but you want to fold that over and stick a pin. And these are just straight pins. Stick a pin in the middle. And you're just basically trying to keep things in place. That's the goal. Keep things in place. They don't move around. I'm going to turn this. Again, I'm not good at exact. I am just trying to make it something that I will want to use later. And none of this will be visible, so if you pierce your fabric, that's okay. Just try not to pierce yourself. So that looks pretty good, I think, right? That's how I want my spine. So now you want to do the same thing with your side pieces. And you want to make sure, you need your little ruler. You need a ruler for this because you want to make sure that you have this gap here. Remember we cut these so that there is about a 4 millimeter gap that we want. And that helps with the hinges. And it also helps that there are lines. So you want to fold this over, stick a pin. And it's kind of like when you're sticking a pin in your, like if you're mounting on a foam board, except it's a little bit more difficult to catch the actual cardboard. And this would be way more difficult if it were like a cereal box or something. But you can do it. And you might want to do like a spray basting. I just don't love glue, so that's why I don't use glue. And if you notice, I did not put a pin there because that is where the miter is. So there's that, and now we will put in this side. So now that the top and bottom are pinned, you can kind of see if it's even or not, and that looks fairly even on that side and fairly even on that side, and make sure that it can bend without being hindered. And I think that that looks pretty good, but that's how that is. And then you do the sides. And this is, you know, how you can make sure everything is where you want it before you start doing your adhering. This part is very forgiving. And again, don't get too close to the corner because we're going to be mitering these corners. So that is essentially what we're going to look like. So that's looking pretty good, I think. That's what we have. That's what our book's going to look like. Now that that's pinned and things are like in place, now we can get out the stitchery tape. And what I recommend doing, you want to make sure that the whole outside is attached. Has stitchery tape, and I do the top and the bottom first, and then I miter the corners, and then I do the sides, and I'll show you why. So again, I'm not good at exact. Sorry about my arm. So I just sort of go by eye, apply it, as best you can. Trim off any excess, stick that down. And put that all on the top and the bottom. So the top and the bottom are set here, and I feel like that looks pretty okay. So first you want to miter the corners, and to miter the corners, here, let's make sure these are all really well stuck down. And you kind of want to just pull up a piece, not the whole, don't pull off the whole thing. Just kind of pull it up like that, and you want to square off that corner. And this is really easy with Aida, or relatively, not really easy. It's relatively easy with Aida because the lines are so pronounced. And you want to do that on all four corners. And I don't stretch it. Sorry about my head, by the way. I just realized my head's in the way. So these just need to be stuck down. So that way you have mitered corners. I'm sorry about my head in the way. I'm terrible at this whole, like, not getting, I'm terrible at this whole thing. I hope I'm recording. I am. Just checking. And let's just keep squaring these up. There we go. Okay, so our corners are now mitered. I think at this point I want to secure the top and the bottom. So what I will do is pull off, well no, I want to start in the middle. Start in the middle, pull off that. Don't pull too, you know, you don't want it to be too tight, but you do want it to be tight on the front, but not too tight. So this will kind of secure the middle and the spine. So there we go. Now we have a spine, although that's a little bit tight, it seems. So let's loosen it up a bit. Loosen it up a bit. There we go. And then I'm going to start with this side. Keep that down. Sorry about my head. But you want it to be, you know, fairly straight so there are like no bubbles. And this stitchery tape is fairly forgiving. So it's a little bit forgiving. Okay, so there's one side. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. And then we want to do this side. Yeah, that all looks pretty good, I think. That all looks pretty good. Now we need to do the sides. And the sides, if you remember, don't have any tape here. And the reason why is because I want to make sure that there's no gap in the tape on the side. So now you want to take your tape and slightly overlap your sides. Not a ton, just a little. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. And you do the same thing. And you could do this with just glue. And you could do this with just stitchery tape. I'm using a combination because the stitchery tape is like an immediate stickiness, which means that at this point the pieces like aren't moving, which I really like. But the glue I think is a more permanent hold. So you kind of have the best of both worlds where you have your immediate stickiness so that everything is where it should be. And then you also have the long-lasting glue. At this point, let's make sure everything's stuck down. Make sure we like it. I think that we do. The nice thing about the stitchery tape is that it's somewhat forgiving, so you can pull it off if you don't like it. But I think that that is an excellent cover. So I'm going to pull out all these pins. The pins are no longer necessary. They were just, I'm stuck. They were just a temporary measure. If you notice, my tape is about twice as wide as my overlap. And I do that on purpose because I'm eventually going to stick this to that side. So I want to make sure that, again, it has that immediate stick and then the glue is the permanent stick. That's kind of the plan. And you could also put stitchery tape on the other side or use adhesive on the other side. But like I said, I think I said, this is like my second time doing this, but I think I said that I don't like having any glue or anything on my stitching because I don't want it to come through. I don't want it to discolor. And so there's no glue on this stitching. The glue is only on the other pieces. Now that we have these corners done, what I like to do is sew up the corner to miter it. And this part here is going to be covered, so it'll just kind of look like a nice little mitered corner. And I do that with some thread that is, you know, close enough. In this case, this is kind of an off-white, and that's close enough. And I just use an embroidery needle. I think embroidery needles are like the best for sewing. Hand sewing, in my mind anyway. And so I have my embroidery needle. I'm doing a loop start, and what that means is that I've taken my thread and have halved it, and that way there's not going to be a knot at the beginning, and the beginning is going to be very secure. So let us thread that. I'm going to do the loop on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. And then you just pass your needle through the loop and it's stuck. Now I'm just kind of going to sew it, and if these met up nicer, and for some reason they never meet up nicely, I don't know, but at this point I'm going to do kind of like just regular sewing them together, and then I'm going to do the invisible stitch, which when I get up to the top here. So for now I'm just stitching it. I want this to be relatively tight, and so at this point I'm doing an invisible stitch, which is where you go in and out of each side of the part you're joining so that it just kind of comes together. Sorry, I have to turn it so that I can see what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to go back down the same way, just because I want to make sure, first of all, I want the knot, my final knot, to be underneath the fabric that's going to be covering it, underneath the red felt, but also because I don't want the corners to be the place where the end is, because that will fray really easily. I hope you can see this. And so now we have a really nice corner. I hope you can see that. And the front corner looks really nice as well. So that's what I'm going to do for all of them. Now I'm going to just tie a knot. Get this. I basically just want this secure. I want it to look nice and be secure. So let's do a little stitch and a little knot. And there we have our first mitered corner. And that should be pretty stable, and it will also have the felt on top, so it'll be like extra stable. So I'm going to do the rest of those and then come back. Okay, so these corners are all mitered. I hope that you can see that. I can't really see what you're seeing, but they're all stitched down and mitered, and I think it looks good from the front, and our spine is pretty good. So that'll work nicely. And I do think I'm going to try something maybe controversial. So I do want this to be, you know, tight in there. And I'm going to put this on top just to kind of seal it off. I might actually stitch down, hand stitch down there, just to make sure that things don't bunch up. I need to figure out how large I want my inside piece to be. This is 11 1/8 or 28-ish centimeters by 5 7/8 or about 15 centimeters. So let me write that down. So I want there to be a little bit of give, and the thing to remember about felt is that it does stretch. So I think I want to give myself maybe a 1/2 centimeter. Yeah, 1/2 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. 1/2 centimeter on each side, which means it's a centimeter. So that would be 27 centimeters this way, or 14 centimeters that way. So let's put this to the side and measure this out. So again, this is just cheap felt, and you can use other things too. You can use a nice paper, you can use a nice other fabric. The reason why I'm using felt is because I don't have to worry about the edges. You can use like a leather or a cork, right? You have all different options. You just have to make sure that the outside is nice. So if you use a different fabric like a linen or a cotton, you're going to want to serge and hem the outside so that it's sort of like a nice outside fabric, right? You don't want fraying happening on the fabric. So just that's why I'm using felt. You can also buy like nicer wool felt, right? This is just the cheap stuff because that's what I have. And I have enough craft stuff that I'm not going to go out and buy more craft stuff if I don't need more craft stuff, if this works well enough. So you want to find the squarest side. There we go. And measure 27. This a little on the inside. Slightly smaller with no black line is better than a black line showing. And because I messed up on the other side, it has to be on this side. Okay, that is the width. Let's just make sure that it works. Yes, it does. Excellent. And then this way needs to be 14 centimeters. So let's do 14 centimeters. Now keep in mind, this is still sticky, but I have, it covers it nicely like that. And I think that will look very nice. Good, good, good. Okay, so now we are going to start gluing again. And as with the other sections, you want to start with the middle. And again, I'm using Eileen's tacky glue. And you just want to put a little bit up there and put a bit in between. Sort of, you have the tape. I'm putting it a little bit on the tape also. But that tape, so now let's do, so the glue's down, and now I'm going to fold this in half. I'm actually going to put it this way. Fold it in half. And do my best to center it. We don't want that whole part to stick, but we do want this part to stick. And we do want it in those creases. Okay, now let's do this side. So we want to peel it up. Now that we know that things are where we want them to be, we can glue the rest of it. You especially want to make sure that the top and the sides are have enough glue. And down in the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick that in there as I stretch it over. So that way, sorry, I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of stretching it because felt stretches pretty nicely. And so now we have kind of a nice little fold there. Now we want to do the same thing with this side. So peel it up gently. It is sticking to the tape, but that's okay. I'm glad you guys can't see the faces that I'm sure that I'm making, because I am like grimacing and grinding my teeth and all sorts of things. Okay, so these are pretty stuck down. You can see the glue through, but that should dry clear. Eileen's dries clear. The chipboard that I have has a white side and a brown side. The reason why I did the white side on the front and the brown side on the back is because I wanted to get as close to this color as possible so that you couldn't see the kind of the line of demarcation on through the felt. Whereas on the front it doesn't matter because there's padding. This we want to be a nice sharp line, and that's why I do think I'm going to sew that, because I don't have any, because we want it like that. Look at that, everybody. That looks so good. Okay, so we're going to let this dry. We're going to let this dry as it is, and then we'll come back when it's dry and we will just put a line of stitches all the way up there. And I think I'm going to use, I might try and find a better match that's a little bit whiter than I want. And I'm pretty sure I have a more natural looking thread that I can use. But this is looking really good. It's not looking tight. I was thinking about putting in a ribbon closure, and I should have done it earlier. But what you would want to do is basically put this underneath your felt. And I totally forgot. And I think at this point, me taking it apart will be more damage than having the closure. But I can still do a tie closure, or I can come up with something else and it'll be fine. But if you wanted to do this, you would want to put it pretty far down like that underneath the red, and then put another one, and then when it closes you can tie them. But I'm not going to do that. And in fact, I might attach like a little button or something, or like a little bead, and that will work later on. Okay, I found this color, which is a much better match. So I think that'll look great. So I'm going to use this to stitch these two together. And I think it's pretty dry at the moment. Eileen's dries nice and quick, so that's good. Okay. All right, let's sew up that spine, and I'm going to do a back stitch. So I want to do a loop start. So I want to make sure I have a good length. So I can do a nice loop start and have enough to finish a whole side. I do not want to be stopping and starting threads. That's for sure. Thread your needle. I'm going to loop start at the bottom, which is down here. And I might actually just pull this up a tiny bit and loops, and to put it through there. Let that dry again so it doesn't get all over my needle. And now I'm going to stitch this from the front. I want to make sure that there's as little evidence of these stitches as possible. So I'm going to just really carefully stitch this together. And I'm basically doing back stitches, but I'm also making sure that I didn't start at the end. I'm going to go under my red stitches and then back in, because I don't want this to show. So I don't know, so if you can see on this side, there's going to be kind of a line down here, and I'm just trying to make this a very bendy spine, and so it doesn't move around. And I'm essentially encasing this piece here in stitches, so this spine is not going to go anywhere, and that's also very good. So I'm gonna, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna just fast forward this or cut it out. I'm probably just gonna cut it out. But I'm just gonna do a back stitch all the way down, making sure that I go under these stitches. Sorry, my fingers have glue on them. These stitches on the end, so that way you can't see, it's not going, I don't want this back stitch to go over those stitches. So I'm actually gonna weave under those stitches to do my back stitch. It's gonna take a while, but I think in the end, it'll be worth it. So I'm gonna do that. Okay, I just wanted to show you the difference. Here it is stitched, the one side stitch, this is the inside. And then here's the other one where it's kind of all bubbly, and I'll turn it over too. You can't see where that, I mean, I guess you can kind of see if you're looking for it, or you can kind of see it there. You can really see how nicely that is now folded in. So I'm going to do this side, and I think that it will be kind of the perfect way to finish it off. Okay, so I'm done stitching it, and it looks pretty good. They're fairly straight. It's a little bit wonky. I'll show you when I close it, but here we have the stitched deer, and I mean, that looks pretty decent, right, as a spine. Each side looks pretty good. I think if I were to make a third one of these, because, you know, I already made my template. So this is definitely better than the template, which is way too stiff. And I think that it's getting better. But if I were to do this again, I might actually make I would make this a tad bit, the spine a tad bit smaller, and I would probably make the padding a tad bit smaller. But otherwise, I mean, that looks pretty good. So now on to the traveler notebook bit. My dog, there he is. Hi, Pops. I'm back. I had to make a puppy cuddle pit stop. As I was saying, this is the hard part. So you have a cover, and that's the hard part. The easy part is the doing of the elastics. And these are what are going to keep the pages or the little notebooks inside. And what you do is you just slip your notebooks underneath, and then you have a notebook, and then you can trade these out. And that's what's great about a traveler's notebook, is that you can pull your pages in and out and you still have this kind of binder. At this point, you need to figure out where you want your, well, how many you want, how many notebooks will fit, and also where you want your elastics to be. So we're just going to put in 2, and the reason I'm putting in 2 is because the elastic part is much easier to deal with. The way it works is that you come in from the outside, come down, loop around the outside, come back in, and then go back out, and then you tie a knot. And what I have are some red beads to decorate and make basically like a beaded tassel. That, of course, is optional, but I thought that it would be really pretty. So that's what I'm doing. And what you want to do is you want to mark where your books are, and for 2 you just need a hole, 2 holes at the top, 2 holes at the bottom, and they need to be essentially above or around where the top of your books are. That's about even, I think. Let's just make sure that that looks even on that side. That looks even on that side. Now comes the awl. So you want to make sure that you're going through. And there we go. There's 1, 2, and then I'm going to go through from the other side as well. So there's those 2. 1, 2, and now let's poke it through. Okay, so at this point, this is when you cut your length, and you need to make sure that you have a tail, because I'm going to do a thing. I'm going to do a tassel at the end. So you want a tail, it needs to go down, up, and tail. So, and for me, longer is better than shorter. You know, I want to really make sure that I have enough. You can always cut it off, but you can't make it longer once it's cut. And I use a very large needle. Where did my needles go? So like I said at the beginning of this video, these are from a book binding kit, and they have very large eyes. I've tried other ways, and I know not everyone has a book binding kit, but you can probably just buy a really large needle. I have tried it with a DMC sized 1 needle, and it was not large enough. You really do need sort of a ridiculously large needle to do this. Just because I'm going to try the second to most ridiculous needle. Because the point is that you have to be able to thread this needle with your stuff here. And I think last time I did this, it actually needed a little bit of help to get through from like another needle. So let's see if I can do this. Haha, I got it. Finally. And yeah, it's a ridiculously large needle, and I needed the help of another ridiculously large needle to get it done, but it got done. And the nice thing is that with this method, you're mostly coming in from the front, so it won't damage your fabric too bad. So you just want to go through the hole that you've already done, pull it through, leave your tail like that, go through this direction, ta-da! And that's it. That is the extent of this. So I want this to be fairly tight, right? You don't want it to be like floppy. You don't want your books to be floppy. So I try to make it fairly tight, and it'll loosen up once you tie it, because you can never tie it as tight as you want it to be. And that is essentially all you need for a traveler's notebook. Let's cut this up. That's a traveler's notebook. That's all it is. It's a case, like a cover, and some notebooks inside. Right? That is, I think that looks pretty good. I gotta be honest with you. So I have these beads. I'll put them out. This is a bead that my mom made. My mom used to and may start again making lampwork beads, and so I thought that would be nice. They basically chose red and sort of browny colors. So what I'm thinking is this. So I'm thinking this and then this. I'm gonna do that. I think that'll look cute. Well, we'll see. So let's put them together. Okay, now we have a cute little tassel-y thing that, I don't know, it's good enough. This looks a little, I don't know how much I love these two little dangles, but it does the job. And we'll put our little notebooks in. And of course you can pull it up if you want to write, right, so it won't get in the way. And we have a traveler's notebook, my friends. I don't think I'm gonna do a, oh, this is a little bit heavy. My tassel's a bit heavy. I might just have these 3 with a clear bead, but I'll do that later. I'm also not gonna worry about putting in a closure. If I decide to do that, I'll do it off camera. And I'm also not going to try and figure out how to do a pen in here until, like, I'll do it off camera if I decide to do it and show you. But there is space if you want to put a little bit of felt in here, a piece of felt. Have like a pen holder where you can stick a pen in, right? So you just go, and then you have your pen and your notebooks, and you can travel. So there you go. That's that. So I'm going to flip you back around and show you what I did. I hope that that was helpful for you. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. The best way is probably Instagram. If you're on Instagram, you can find me at Dr_Christy, and you can send me a direct message or comment on one of my posts, and I will try to help you out as much as I can. You can also put a comment down below, and I'll answer that as well when I can. But a couple things that I would change. So as you can see, I took off the two little, like the two dangles from my little decoration here. And it was just too heavy, and I really kind of like how this looks. It has a nice, I don't know, it has a nice feel, and my mom made this bead, so I definitely wanted to keep that on there. The other thing I would have done is I probably would have made the spine slightly narrower. I made the chipboard the exact width of from this stitch line to this stitch line, and I probably should have made it slightly smaller to account for the padding. As for the padding, I also would have made the padding a little bit smaller on all the sides. I would probably do a millimeter smaller on each side. I don't like the padding all the way to the end of the board. But really, I think that that's all that I would change. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. And I do think that I might take that ribbon that I showed you and do a little pen loop here. I'll do like a top and a bottom pen loop. And then I think I'm going to take some of that elastic cording, sew on another red bead, and kind of sew in the cording and kind of make a little closure at some point, like a toggle closure. But for now, this stays closed pretty well, and I'm not really going to worry about it. So yeah, that's how I made my traveler's notebook, and I'm super thrilled with this. Like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know. If you like this video and want to see more videos of ways you can finish these different pieces and you want to see what I'm stitching, please subscribe. I'd love to have you hang out with me and be a part of my community. If you like this tutorial, please like it. And if you make a traveler's notebook using this tutorial, please tag me on Instagram and use my hashtag Christy's Corner. I follow that. I'll put that here. I think at this point, I'm just babbling. I don't have anything else to say. I think that the tutorial is self-explanatory. I hope so. But again, if you have questions, let me know. Thank you so much for joining me, and please take good care of yourselves and have a good one. Bye.